Hey everyone, welcome back to Pak Chat. We'll get started once Jesse gets in here. Hey Jesse.
What's up, Ishan? How are you?
Good, how are you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you all good.
Third time's the charm, eh?
Yeah, right? Hey, people seem to like him, so why not, right?
I hope so.
You know what, we'll just get right into your introduction. For everyone that doesn't know, this is Coach Jesse. I don't think I really need to give much of an intro, but Jesse's been coaching for the club for how many years now?
Oh man, long time since I was
Long
19,
time.
probably 16 actually, since I was 16.
So Jesse's responsible for multiple beach, provincial, and national championships as well as indoor. Jesse's put a lot of work into the club, and there's probably no one that's more dedicated to the club than him. So we're kind of here today just to talk about some coaching philosophies and just kind of see what Jesse's perspectives are on coaching.
All right.
So just to kind of start things up, you want to maybe give everyone just an update of where the club's at right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in a tough situation. It's funny, we did this pack chat in December, and we
Yeah.
had the exact same conversation back in December. And we were in lockdown then, and unfortunately we're still in lockdown now. So in terms of, where we're at now, the OVA had canceled their season, so we shortly followed after that. The hope is that once the lockdown is over, we've been doing a lot of planning for our summer programs. So
Right.
we're really hoping we can run some beach volleyball. We're really hoping we can run some camps, and then just lots of preparation for September. Right. I think that's the best thing. I think that's the best thing we can do. We're obviously in a tough situation. I really feel for the athletes.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a tough time for all the players. So I really hope we can get back to it soon, and I really hope we can run some, a good beach program this summer, and also run some camps
Yeah,
leading
no,
up to leading up to September. That would be ideal for us. I really hope so.
for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So just to get right into the first question, I just wanted to talk about the importance of coaching 12U to 15U and kind of get your perspective on that.
Yeah, those are interesting. It's funny. I actually think those are the hardest age groups. I coach 18U, almost every year,
Mhm.
and if I ever want to challenge myself, I'll go ahead and pick up, an 11U or 12U team.
Yeah.
It's definitely a tough age group. As hard as 18U can be, those age groups it just requires a lot of work and a lot of effort because you have really young athletes who are, the fact that they're young, they don't have huge attention spans,
Hmm.
and they're also in the skill acquisition phase of their career.
Yeah.
So you have to find this nice balance of, okay, we have to get them thousands of touches. We have to teach them every skill in volleyball,
Hmm.
but then on top of that, we have to find a way to make it fun and not mindless, because they have to underhand serve, thousands of times. They have to overhand serve thousands of times. They have to bump a ball to a target. So I really think those are tough age groups to coach because it requires so much groundwork. And that groundwork is important, obviously, as you know, because that leads up to, 16U to 18U and preparing them for the next level. But they're definitely fun though. Like that 12U to 15U range, I think it's incredibly rewarding because the amount of work that coaches have to put into it,
Yeah.
as stressful as it can be, it's definitely rewarding,
I
and
think
and it's a
I
fun
think
it's a fun year.
the really cool part about those age groups too is from the start of the year to the end of the year, you really see the progression, right, and how much better the athletes get.
For sure, 100%. And it's funny because you almost don't notice any progression for the longest time, and then suddenly like it clicks, and then they
Yeah,
can
and
all
it
they
just there's a
it
gap, right? There's a huge
yeah.
gap before and after.
Yeah, it's weird. It's crazy. And then suddenly they can all bump to a target. Suddenly they can all set. And then you have that really nice coaching moment where, all that nice groundwork that you put in and it's just funny because it can definitely be hard.
Yeah.
You have experience coaching a 12U boys team, and you know
Yeah.
what their attention is like, and you know how they can lose track very, very quickly. They can giggle very, very quickly. So it definitely, if you want to earn your coaching stripes, I would say try to pick up a 12U or 13U
Right
team, and
there.
you'll definitely earn your stripes.
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess the same thing just for the age group 16U to 18U.
Yeah, and again, not to discredit those older age groups because those are challenging too. I find that when you get to 16 and 18U, you start getting these really hungry athletes because from 12U to 15U, a lot of these kids are multi-sport athletes. They're playing basketball, volleyball, soccer, hockey. They're just dabbling in volleyball a little bit. But
Right.
then when you get to 16U, you suddenly have these athletes that have kind of given up on other sports, and now they're making volleyball their full-time sport. So you have these really hungry athletes that kind of they want and they need, fuel. Like they need to learn about the sports. I find those age groups are great because you really get to start teaching kids, the next level of volleyball, and I find that starting as early as 16U is great. We always talk about 17 and 18U and, preparing kids for the next level in university. But I find that as early as 16U, you can really start teaching these kids, some of the really important aspects of volleyball, right? Like it's not just bump, spike, serve, set. There's a lot of different elements that go into it. You have to start teaching them tactical. You have to start
Tactics,
teaching,
I guess. Yeah, that's
right? Like at the end of the day, at the grand scheme of things, anybody can serve, right? Anybody can serve a ball over net if you've done enough reps. But you have to start getting to this really, this level of, can you serve to a target? Can you serve tough? Can you serve 24-24? So I find that those are like, I really enjoy the older age groups, for those reasons, because you really get to hone in on tactical, and then that's like a huge, importance. Like when you play for university now, like your practices now at Brock,
yeah, very
they expect,
tactical.
and they expect you to already know those things. So I find that instead of just teaching a kid at 18U, it's like I think 16U is a really great age to start that, especially with how physical players are nowadays, right? Like I have, I've seen 16U athletes that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", like they're getting huge. So I don't see why we can't start teaching kids a lot more at those younger ages, and then getting them ready for 18U, and then inherently getting them ready for the for the next level.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to hit the questions that we got in the question box really quickly, just because I want those people who ask the question just to make sure that they have their question heard.
Sure.
So the first one I have for you is, has your coaching philosophy kind of ever changed throughout your career?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess when I first started coaching, I almost didn't have a philosophy when I first started coaching. It was more like I just wanted to take all of the things that I learned from other coaches and try to apply it, to the kids that I'm coaching now. So I almost didn't have my own style. There's definitely one thing that I knew that was important was the day I started coaching, I understood the importance of making sure that the players come first. I'm like, no matter what I do in any team that I coach, I want to make sure that the athletes come first, their needs come first, they get what they need out of the team and out of the situation. Because like I grew up in a very nurturing volleyball environment. We've had many talks before in the other Pack Chats, and
Yeah.
we've had a lot of guys on the Pack Chat from my previous age. Terrell Bramwell, Daniel Deering, Kadeem Clark, those guys, and we've spoken about that really nurturing environment we had growing up, where we were given rise to tournaments, to practices, making sure we had food to eat, and so I found that my first philosophy was, if I can at the very least make sure that I take care of every player as best as I can,
Then you
then
feel like you've done your job.
and then everything else, everything else will follow. So that was like my baseline. And then as I got older, I wouldn't say my philosophy changed. I would just say I kind of maybe added layers to my philosophy, right?
Right.
Whereas I remember when I was coaching one of my first teams, they were 15U. I really cared about like tournaments. I really cared about going to a tournament, winning a tournament, and I learned that. And I remember having a couple of years where, we had actually won like every single tournament leading up to provincials, but then we would lose provincials. And it was such a like kind of heartbreaking, upsetting, situation. But those things taught me that process over performance, is something that I need to focus on moving forward. So I think that's where the layers of my philosophy change. So now I'm a really big believer in process, right? Process over performance. I don't think about the tournaments as much. Is it nice to win one?
Of course.
100% it's nice. But my thing is that I actually hated winning matches or winning tournaments where we didn't actually work on some of the things that we worked on, because
Yeah, and we've been over that so many times, right?
yeah, and when you have teams with lots, oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
I have a shaky stand here. When you have teams with a lot of depth, you're inherently going to win a lot of matches, and especially in pool play. But again, if you're not working on some of the things like we like to work on, if you're not running the back row attack, if you're not running the middle and transition, those wins aren't as valuable. So that's kind of where it takes away from the process. Like, is it good to win a match?
Of
Sure.
course. Yeah.
But I can sometimes live with a loss if we were working, extensively on some of the things that we've done in practice. Those things are those things are really, really important.
Right. The second one I have here is, what are some key components to building a winning culture? So getting all 12 guys to buy in, I guess just having everyone there working hard at practice every day.
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's always different for every team. And I find that, like in my experience, I think just making sure that every player gets what it is they need out of the experience,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the day, volleyball is a very tough sport, to be fair, right? Because you take 12 or 13 or 14 guys, but you really only have seven, 6 or 7
You got
playing at a
6 or 7 spots.
time. So I find that, being able to give everybody an opportunity, especially in practice and then in
Mm-hmm.
tournament, I think that's a really, that for me, that's been a good way to get everyone to buy in, and get everyone to always be ready in a tournament. Like me personally, I don't believe in A lineup and B lineup in practice. I don't even like the term like starters here and bench guys, they're like, I find that those are really, especially like calling a group of guys or girls, hey, bench over there. I find that's really, negative, and it can also take away a lot of confidence from athletes. So,
Yeah.
anyone that's ever played on my teams, they'll know that, and you know this really well, is we
Mm-hmm.
always do different lineups in practice. Every
Yeah.
player gets a chance to play with every setter, and every, and even at tournaments, we always mixed up different
It was
lineups.
always, yeah, it was always different, right?
And I think there's definitely lots of value in that as well, because like, let's look at like a preparation standpoint where nowadays everyone has access to film, and
Mm-hmm.
nowadays everyone's recording. If a team wants to recruit against us or watch our film, they may,
It's so hard. It's so
yeah,
hard because you see so many different lineups.
and we'll definitely have a starting lineup per se in the semis or in the finals. But again,
Mm-hmm.
that's at least they don't see that lineup for 6 or 7 matches in one
Yeah.
tournament. They might only have that for a couple matches here and there, and then obviously our team will grow and we'll get better. So I find for a lot of reasons there's value in not having an A and B lineup per se and giving everyone an opportunity, and then from there you kind of don't know who's going to step up. I think being able to put your athletes in their practice in that environment where they get to compete and they get to not just be a bench guy and get
Yeah.
beat in every scrimmage. I think from my experience that's definitely helped. And then I think what it does is it pushes the quote unquote starters or the guys that we kind of know are going to play when it matters. I really think you have to be willing to, you know let's say we have a player that's our best player. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing to bench that player. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to put that player in his place in a practice for everybody to see. Like I
Yeah.
honestly think
Hold
that
them, hold them accountable, I guess, right? Accountable.
you 100% have to, and then the athletes have to know that you're doing that as well. And again, I know, like when I take 14 guys, my 14th guy or girl is as important as the number one guy or girl, right? Because your best players are going to be the best players, but if you have a group of athletes that maybe aren't motivated to come into practice, or maybe skipping practice because it's just like, hey,
I
that's
don't feel
where
like going today. Yeah.
that's a huge detriment to your team. That's where you're going to start losing, and that's where you're going to not have everybody buy in and care when it matters. Because when you get to May and when you get to nationals, you really need every single player to buy in, even the guys on the bench. Like how many tournaments have you been to as a coach and as a player where you've seen bench players sulking on the bench?
Yeah. You see it so often.
Or you see parents, having a fit
Complaining
upstairs,
or
and
bickering.
and,
Yeah.
and they're just waiting to blast the coach,
Yeah.
and those things all pile up. I think by being as fair as possible and giving opportunity to everybody in practice and in tournament, I think that's really the best way to get to get what you need out of them. And the thing is that kind of goes back to my point about how I kind of stopped caring about tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
No one remembers tournament 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
People only really remember May, and that's just human nature. Like you look at basketball, like LeBron James, when he wins like the MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Again, maybe I'm not a huge fan of basketball, but I don't remember the runner-ups of those
Yeah.
MVPs.
You never
I
do.
don't, I don't remember who he was running up against. I don't remember the top three guys. You just don't. You just remember the ones.
You remember the team. Yeah. You remember who
You
won.
you just remember those things, right? So that's why, I think that fairness to everybody, is definitely an important aspect.
Mm-hmm. I think one misconception a lot of people have is I think they think that the only objective in H&U is to win, right? What other things like do you like kind of work on when you're coaching an H&U team?
Yeah, you know what, that theory is interesting, right? Because you hear a lot of different things. How many times have you heard, it's not about winning, and it's, I look at it like it's team by team. You know, I think that if you have a team that's very capable of having
Mhm.
success, I think winning has to be one of the most important things that you have to focus on, you know,
Right.
because we're talking about teams that have highly recruited athletes on it. You know what I mean? And then they go into the next level in university or pro or whatever, and they're expected to have this very tough mindset of, because when you go to university, it's not really about fun and game,
Yeah, no,
it, it
you're there to practice, you're there to play volleyball.
and you're there to win, and programs rely on winning. Coaches jobs rely on having success at the next level so they don't get replaced by other coaches, right? So
Mhm.
I find that, you know if I was coaching when I coach 12U teams and when you coach your 12U team, we never have that conversation of winning is
Yeah.
the
No.
only thing, because you have to be smart. Like, these kids are first playing they're playing volleyball for the first time.
Yeah.
You
I
can't
think
just say, hey, you have to win. Then that's how our sport will decrease. That's how kids will, end up playing other sports. And the goal is really to get as many kids as possible,
yeah,
playing volleyball.
to love and enjoy the game of volleyball, right? I think that's one of the biggest things is just getting kids to just enjoy the game. I think that's always the first step.
That's the thing, right? So again, it's hard to say, like, if anybody, if you know me and if you've ever played for me, like, winning is something I really care about. If the team is capable of winning, if you're because like your team, for example, we had a bunch of second place finishes, and it was
Mhm.
unfortunate we didn't get to finish our year. But even though we came second, 3 or 4 times, winning was definitely on our docket. It was
Mhm.
definitely part of our pathway. We just were having some, and again, every team has their own little struggles that that they have to get through. But I find that how you teach your athletes to understand, it. I could just say, "Hey, Ishan, you have to win," and you can
Yeah,
just agree with
exactly.
me because I'm your coach. But the thing is, do you really want to win? Are
Yeah,
you are you are you
how
interested in
badly
winning?
do you want to win? Yeah.
And the truth is that a lot of people are indifferent, right? A lot of athletes are, and you've played with athletes, you've coached with athletes, you've coached athletes. They're pretty indifferent. They like, we lost, no big deal. Like, hey, good job,
Mhm.
guys. Like, we'll do it next time. And that there's nothing, necessarily wrong with that. But what happens is if you're in a group of very, very competitive players that really want to win, that's where you start seeing a bit of divide, you know, and finding ways to get each player to, understand the importance of that can definitely be a hard thing. And I find that I'll use an example. Like, we have like 30 plus people in here, a lot of alumni here, which is great.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to win. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I want to lose today. Like, I'm not interested in winning today." Like, everybody wants to conquer their day, right? But and every athlete's like that. I want to win provincials. I want to win nationals. The problem is that doesn't make you a unique. That doesn't make you unique
No.
when everyone wants the same thing. So I find that the athletes that I've coached, and the coaches I've been with, the ones that hate losing the most, they're actually the ones that end up having the most success. Like,
Right.
I'll be honest, I really hate losing. Like, uh, that's one of my faults as a coach is I live with every loss.
Mhm.
I feel sick to my stomach the next day. I'm really upset until the next tournament. It just lives with me. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you gotta go back and prove yourself, right?
For sure. But I find that, like, if you really care about having success and, representing for your club or your teammates, I really think that your hatred towards losing has to be greater than your desire to win,
Mhm.
because everybody wants to win.
Yeah,
But
everyone's there to go to try to win the tournament, right?
yeah, but at 24-24, do you really, like, care enough to, like, we have to get this win, or I don't want the ball to hit the floor? And I've been pretty lucky because, the teams I've coached in the past, for the most part, have always had that type of mindset.
Hmm.
They've had that, kind of, winning attitude, whatever you want to call it. And again, that's transitioned over to the next level.
Yeah.
That's always, when we look at a lot of our alumni, you know. By the way, I want to give a special shout out to Cole Ketrzinski. He was an honorable mention today for All American, in his first year, which is pretty impressive. So a guy like him, right?
Hmm.
Um, that kind of, tough mindset of, like, not wanting to lose. He had that. His brothers had that. A lot of guys, you had that. I can name all of our alumni, and they all
Hmm.
kind of adopted that mindset, which is really, really nice.
Hmm. I wanted to move on just to ask a general question about coaches in the club. We've got a lot of guest coaches in the club, right? We've got Dustin Reed, Leonard Krapp, and Jeff Chung, right? Are the three that come to mind for me.
Hmm.
How do other coaches in the club benefit from learning from those three guys?
Yeah, we've been pretty fortunate to have a really awesome coaching staff within our club. Not just the guest coaches that we come, but like our regular day-to-day coaches, our house league coaches, our rep coaches, like our lineup this year for coaching from 11U to 18U, like I was beyond impressed. Everyone was, like a top-notch person.
Hmm.
Some were like very experienced veteran coaches. Some were just, really nice coaches that were eager to learn. So everyone had this really positive plus side. And
Right.
I think how that happens is it helps that some of our coaches have been around since day one. Like if you look at some of the guys that have been together, myself, Alex, Kadeem, Pratik,
Yeah.
some of the guys that played in the club and then coach in the club, we've been pretty fortunate to be involved with a lot of other coaches like Dustin and Jeff Chung,
Yeah.
and the list actually goes on. And we've gone to countless coaching symposiums and clinics. It's actually one of the things is that how we also relay what we've learned to the rest of the coaches in our club. So
Right.
you
Yeah.
have 4 or 5 core, and sorry, Deem as well. Like there's lots of people. So
Yeah. There's so many people.
if I
There's so
forget you,
many
I
people.
apologize in advance. But you have this core group of 4 or 5 or 6 coaches that share the wealth of everybody. So when we have new coaches come in, we built a curriculum with everything we learned in the last 15 years. We share it with everyone. There's no secret to coaching. We're not here trying to
No.
just collect wins for ourselves. We're here to make sure that everyone's learning. And this year's coaching staff, it's unfortunate that we hardly got a season. It was so impressive, as to how deep we were and how many people were eager to learn. Like just having day-to-day conversations. And it also helped that, we were training at Canlan, there's 3 courts side by side. So you always had different
And you
teams
always saw
beside each
people.
other.
Yeah. You saw
You
everyone.
always saw people, you always interacted with people. If a coach spotted you and they hadn't seen you a couple of days and they have a question, they would ask me like, hey, Jesse, what do you think about this? I really like that because in a normal world, when we kind of have our own separate gyms, we don't get to do as much of that,
Hmm.
a sharing of information. We do our best over email and phone calls, but there's nothing better than having, a conversation with someone in person when you're actually looking at their team perform, and then you can,
Right.
give some honest feedback. So obviously with the help of guys like Dustin and Jeff Chung and, there's tons of guys there. They've really helped us in Leonard Crap and Beach. They've
Hmm.
really helped us learn a lot about volleyball. And then again, it's our job to not just keep that information. So I think our coaches, I give them all the credit in the world for sharing that information out and helping build this really nice core group of coaches that we have.
And just talking about that core of coaches that we have in the club, what responsibility do they hold just being Pac-Man coaches?
Yeah, you know what? I won't even just say Pac-Man coaches. I think the coach's responsibility in general for every sport, for every age group, I think it's a huge responsibility. And I think some people don't realize, and I talk about this a lot with sometimes younger coaches when we're
Hmm.
trying to mentor them and they're just getting into coaching,
Right.
is we talk about the amount of influence that they have on. I don't think coaches realize how much influence they have. Aside from their own
Right.
families, your players are with you 3 and 4 and 5 days a week. They spend weekends with you at tournaments, so
Yeah.
you
They're
have
always
a
with you. Yeah.
mass,
They're always with
you
you.
have a massive, massive influence on them in terms of, especially when they're younger, right? So, we talked about just like coaching behavior and, how you present yourself and, how you act in practice and how you act at a tournament. Like these are things that the kids see. And maybe, sometimes coaches don't always see that, but that's something we talk about a lot in our club with all of our coaches. And we just
Hmm.
talked about that responsibility. Like, so it's actually not fair how much power we have, like
Yeah.
in my lifetime of playing and coaching, I've seen so many teams lose a game because a coach blew it for them,
Right.
like they lost their, shit on the bench and they
Hmm.
blew it, and they stopped coaching. And, I've seen that happen like time and time again. And it's funny, I've seen that at like the highest levels, whereas if you kind of just kept your cool and, calm down a
Yeah.
little bit.
Everything would have been all right.
Yeah, I think so because you see it countlessly, and again, you have to kind of show coaches those types of scenarios, saying that hey, you can really have a negative impact because when the kids
Right.
are younger, when they make a mistake, they look at their parents. That's just
Hmm. Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
And
natural.
that's kind of common. Yeah.
That's natural, but as they get a little older and they start understanding the sport better and they start kind of moving away from parental influence and focusing on their coach and the team, the coach is who they look at,
Yeah.
when they're in trouble. So if you're like a super up and down rah-rah person, they see that. But then if you're also down when things are not going well, they see that as well. So I find that um, every time I watch a team, the first thing I look at is like, okay, how is the coach? How
And
are
what's
they
their
acting?
demeanor? Yeah.
and is the players responding to what the coach is? And honestly, like 8 or 9 times out of 10, if I see a team totally fold and, have a complete meltdown, it's
Mm-hmm.
likely that the coach is on the bench sulking or,
Sulking or yelling or something. Yeah.
something, right? And that's the thing. So for me, it's like when we talked about our philosophy, it's like, hey, we have to do what's important for the players first. It's not about us. And the sad thing is that there's coaches. There's two types of coaches. There's coaches that coach because they love it and they want to give back to the community, which
Mm-hmm.
I honestly feel like our coaches
A lot of the
are
coaches.
that big because you see it. All of our coaches are alumni and they're former athletes and they've been
Mm-hmm.
around forever. But then there's
Yeah.
coaches that do it for like personal gain and personal merit, and
Right.
that's where things get tricky, right? Because if you're out here coaching and you want to be like the 12U girls provincial champion of the world and get like that's where things get a little bit tricky because
Yeah.
you now care about yourself more than your players, and then
And
you
I
know
think that's one of the big things is just not having an ego, right? Being a coach.
yeah. And the thing is that yeah, you might make 7 out of the 12 players really really happy, and the starters and the parents might love you, but you have to look out for the 4 or 5 or 6 other players on the team that maybe didn't get much out of the experience. Like I think you
Mm-hmm.
have to be fair to everybody, and then that's why sometimes you see so much fluctuation in volleyball. Sometimes you like how often do you see players leave one team and go to another team,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because they'll even leave a team that was like a championship team. It's not like
Yeah.
they left the worst team to just. I've seen in Ontario volleyball, I've seen this a million times where like the provincial championship team loses all their players.
Right.
And if you're only trying to make 2 or 3 people happy, like your quote unquote starters,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where you're going to get into a lot of trouble. And I think that's where the responsibility of a coach, you have to find a way to make it for everybody else. Because if it's for you, then you're in the wrong
Yeah.
field.
You're doing it for the wrong reasons almost.
100%.
So the next thing I had is, what do you think is like the difference between coaching in tournaments versus practice?
Yeah, I think practice has to be very meaningful and technical and lots of correction. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everything that you work on in practice has to continuously be reinforced. If a kid makes a mistake, technically, you have to correct them and let them know and possibly give them an opportunity almost immediately to, correct that. Like if you're
Correct that.
working on if you're working on a certain skill, like hitting down the line and they just hit it out, like a meter to the side, like you have to maybe try to throw in another ball and give them another chance
Give them
to.
another chance to hit that ball.
Whereas tournaments are a lot more tactical, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't think in a tournament you can focus so much on the technical because in the heat of the moment, like kids have
You're
such
gonna
like they're
do
not
what
even
you're comfortable with. Yeah.
they're not even focused on that. Like you call a timeout and you're down a couple points. Like if you're down 18-22, like you can't talk to a left side and talk about his arm swing and his shoulder rotation and next side.
Yeah.
He's not focused on that. You have to find ways in tournament to not only be technical but to motivate, to get your team out of a tough situation,
Right.
because if you spend the 30 seconds or a minute, however long you have, talking about, arm rotation, they're going to go back and make the same mistake. So I find that, yeah, practice is really, really important because, that's where they're getting the reps and the constant feedback.
Mm-hmm.
But then the truth is at tournaments, you have to be a little bit of like a cheerleader to some degree. Not only do you
Right.
have to have a tactic, you have to give them an objective. Like you have to find a way to get players out of a rut, and
Out of
and
a rut and stuff. Yeah.
and you've seen that, and you as an athlete, you've been in ruts, and I've
Yeah.
been in ruts, and it's not about yelling. It's sometimes a player needs a break.
For
For
sure.
example, like for you, like if you're not passing well, I can stand on the sideline and tell you to bend your knees, and
Yeah.
dip
That's
your
not
shoulder.
gonna make.
But realistically, what you really need is you just need to come off for 30 seconds
Mm-hmm.
and just take a deep breath and grab some water. And maybe the middle goes in and makes a half
Makes a
decent
good
dig, and
play.
it
Makes
gets
a good
and then
pass.
it gets everybody excited, and then
You're
okay, then we
rolling.
put you back in.
And
I
yeah, you're rolling. You're good to go.
I think that's really really important, and I think if I look at all the teams that I've coached in 18U, I think we've always been able to use that to buy 3 or 4 points a set, and at 18U, like 3 or 4 points a set is a
Points
lot,
a lot. Yeah.
and you have to assume that like I always tell the players, you have to assume that every game is going to be third set 15-13.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Yeah.
you can buy a couple points here and there off of things like that, you know And that's a coach's job, right? Like a coach's job is as important as a player. Players deserve
Yeah.
almost all the credit. I don't go on the court, I don't dive, I don't dig, I don't spike. But if you really care about your team and you understand your team, you have to know how to balance emotions. And truthfully, like there's so many different emotions on the team,
And so just
and I've coached many teams.
And so just going off of that, right, I guess we're talking about composure in some ways. How can you build that in an athlete?
Yeah, I think it starts with a coach. Like an 18U, 17U athlete, and even 16U, like they're not going to look at their parent when they make a mistake. So I find that it has to start with a coach. So in order to build composure, you have to be composed yourself. If I'm flipping out on the sidelines, if I'm, yelling and screaming, and if I'm upset when we're losing, I don't think we're going to be able to build any composure based off that. And it's funny, I've been told that a million times, like, oh, Jesse, how are you so calm? How are you so, but what they don't understand is like, I'm dying inside. I feel sick to my stomach. I want to throw up. Like I'm doing my best to just keep a, straight face, because
Yeah.
I know that I need to be neutral for when a player looks at me for advice.
Right.
So if they make a crucial mistake and they look at me, I have to tell them, it's okay, or I have to tell them to focus on something different. It's
Right.
that stuff's really, really important. And honestly, that's a lot of that has to do with the player as well and how well they take feedback. Not a lot of players take feedback that,
Yeah. Well.
really well. But I find you have to build that as well. I think that's, you have to teach kids that, it's okay to get feedback. It's okay to hold them accountable. It's okay to be really hard on them. We talked about, holding your quote unquote best player probably the most accountable.
Most
You can't
accountable team.
just let them do, whatever they want. And and you never know, right? Some players don't like that. Some players maybe won't come to a club because of that. Like how many players have you heard of that will only go somewhere if they're like a starter?
Yeah,
if
exactly. And we've all heard that a million times, right?
and I think by being honest and straight up and upfront, I think that, going back to the culture, builds a really, really important environment. I saw Jackson Bear commenting in this, and I'll never forget when he called me in the summer when he joined our team.
Mm-hmm.
His first year is playing for us in 18U, and he just said he was really interested in playing. And I remember telling him, like, hey, I just want you to know, I have the two best middles in the country at the moment. I have Matthew Powell and Tyler, and they were both phenomenal at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I just want you to know that you have to work hard. I can't promise you anything. And his response was perfect. He just said, honestly, he's like, I totally understand that. I just want to come. I want to work hard. I want to play with good players,
Yeah,
But
and look at the success he had, right?
and it's like, he invested in himself. That's a term we hear a lot in basketball. And Fred
Mm-hmm.
Van, like, he's one of my favorite basketball players. He says, bet on yourself. Like, that was a great moment, because I've had a lot of athletes that, so like when I come, like, will I be the starting so and so? And I'll say no. You'll hard, and that's actually deterred people from coming. That's actually made them go elsewhere. And I
Yeah,
find
go on.
that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a 6'8" middle, if you're a 6'10" left side. You can't be guaranteed anything, because you have to come and you have to work hard. And again, you look at the success. Like Jackson came, there were three amazing middles, and he released it out, and now he's on the next gen team for
He's a
2024. So like as a coach, that's very proud, and like I'm very proud, and it's very validating for me, because I could have lost an athlete like that and like
Yeah.
kicked myself, but I'm glad that that was all in him. He chose to want to work hard, and he definitely did.
Work hard and earn his spot. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's awesome, right? And I think lots of guys will do that, but that lots of guys won't as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
They'll
there's
just
lots of guys.
they'll just go where there's maybe a very comfortable, safe spot. And
Mm-hmm.
again, whether it's on a winning team or not, and that's where you can't build a strong culture like that. Like if you don't care about winning or losing, and you just want to go somewhere to maybe play, then you might not have as much
You might not.
you might not have as much success as you want to.
For sure. And then the last thing I have for you is just advice for younger coaches that want to be successful and take their team to provincial finals, national finals.
Yeah. Something I've always told coach, like, everyone's played, right? So everyone that comes and coaches in our club, they've all played to some degree. Majority played with us. Some people
Mm-hmm.
play elsewhere. Majority have played at, in the OUA, OCAA.
Yeah.
I just say, I tell kids now, like younger kids that I coach, I'm like, be very mindful of the things you learn from other coaches. Be mindful of the guest coach. Every time we have Dustin Reed or Jeff Chung come in and run a clinic or a session, I say, guys, we always say, give your 100% attention. When you leave the practice, write notes. You never know when you're going to see this coach again. You never know when they're going to be available to help you.
Yeah, take as much information in as possible.
Yeah, so I would say be incredibly mindful of, the coaches that you have or had. Take little bits and pieces from everyone, because that's how you build your coaching style. That's how you build your philosophy, right? And then just make sure you put the players first. I can't see how a coach won't have success if they prioritize their players before anything else, and then B, use some of the tools that they had themselves as an athlete. And you look at our club, like we have lots of young coaches. Like you started head coaching at 17 and 18 years old. We have a lot of coaches that are in their early 20s, and I'm like, guys, especially if you play for Pac-Man, I'm like, you've had so many resources, you've had so many guest coaches. Just start remembering some of those things, writing things down, build a little bit of a thought process in terms of coaching. Organize your drill. And then the beauty is let's say you don't have any recollection of stuff like that. Let's just say I don't remember any of the drills I did when I played. There's no shortage of coaches like myself and our main coaches, Kadeem, Pratik, Alex, Deem. Like, we've been around forever. So the beauty is as long as you just care, which this year we have, incredible coaches that care a lot. As long as you just care, we have all the resources for you. We can help you. We can show you drills, and we've done that with you. And we've come and run some of your practices. And if you ever needed a drill, you could just call me. Like, I think that's what's cool about the coaches in our club. If you need something, you can call us, and I can, like, I've given drills over the phone. It's not too hard.
Yeah, no, it's not hard to explain.
I just think that if you really care and you want to give back, then coaching's for you. But if you're in it because you just want to be a provincial champion, then you might have a hard time getting athletes that want to play for you. You might have a hard time building that team chemistry and team culture, which it's the most important thing when it comes to winning and having success.
And before we go, I'm going to start keeping a tally now for who everyone thinks is the greatest 18 team of all time. So just to clock in your vote, I want to make sure and confirm you're good with 2008 being your vote.
Yeah, it's probably going to be my vote. Those are my guys. Okay. I grew up playing with them. Mind you, I think I win regardless. I think. Yeah,
you win regardless.
I think so. Yeah. If you count in me coaching the other teams, but I have to stick with my guys. Terrell, Dre, Kadeem, Dan Deering, Chris. Like, the list goes on. I gotta stick with those guys. The 08.
Cool. We'll be getting a tally at the end of the summer, just so we have a clear winner. I feel like we need a clear winner on this debate and end it once and for all.
You can see some of the comments at the bottom. You see a bunch of guys going for 08. You see a bunch of guys going for 18. I agree with 08, but it's always nice.
I'm seeing more 08s than anything else here. I don't know. That just might be the audience.
Paul's on my 16U team, so he knows better. He knows that he has to go for my 08 team.
Yeah, he knows. I see Arjun and Avi don't seem to be agreeing, but
you know what? It's kind of nice that these are even things that we still get to have conversations about over the years. I think for me as a coach and now as like a important member of the club, this is like everything we're seeing in these chat groups is all club culture, right? It's all it's all based off of years of making sure everyone got exactly what they needed out of the club. So the fact that we can have these types of conversations, it's really nice. And for me, it's like you always get nervous. I'm like, is anyone going to watch? Is anyone going to comment? So it's always nice seeing former players and alumni.
It's nice to see former people in here.
For sure. And again, these conversations will continue because there's not going to be any shortage of strong 18U teams in our club. I think we're always going to have really good teams. And I think, right now the pool is based off of like 4 or 5, 3 or 4 teams. I think that pool is going to grow substantially. In 10 years, I can see us having, many, many more, 18U national champions for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the goal, right?
It'd be nice. It's a nice thing for the younger athletes to see, because not only does the culture come for each team, it's club-wide as well. I think the 12Us, for example, they need to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They need to see the 18U guys, So, when I how many times do we try to, look at the team that you had, that 12U team, when we'd always get the 18U guys to mingle and just say what's up and how's it going, having those types of conversations. There's so much, we cross paths so much in our club so that when the 12Us walk by.
even just the kids staying after their practice to watch our practice as well, right?
That stuff's valuable. And I think that's what this whole, like, everything that we're seeing now in the chat and in the comments, that's accumulation of, that growing up seeing, athletes that are older than you and seeing that kind of light at the end of the tunnel. So it's
Yeah,
definitely something to look forward to. And, hopefully we can get back to a regular full season.
for
It's been,
sure.
it's definitely been tough, but hopefully we can.
For sure. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
We'll have to do a fourth time sometime soon.
Sounds like we might have to.
Sounds good.
I
All right.
appreciate you, Sean. You're doing a good job, man. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
All right. We'll be back on Thursday with Azim Rahim, who just committed actually to the University of Harvard.